Hey everyone, welcome back to Low Budget Logistics, your logistics and supply chain explainer, where we use low budget methods to explain difficult, complex concepts. Today, we're going to be talking about, as you can see, planes, and really about air freight. We're going to talk really about three different things. One, what is air freight? Two, why would you use it? And then we're going to talk about the complexities around the air freight world. So let's go ahead and start by saying, what is air freight? So air freight is moving stuff on an airplane. Not a difficult concept to understand, but it gets complex because there's a few different types of air freight. So there's the normal sort of air cargo, which is typically seen on the international side, so moving between countries, and these are going to be planes that have been specifically set up to move cargo. There'll be no passengers on those planes. They will only be holding cargo, and that's it. Pretty specialized part of the industry. I say that a lot, though. A lot of specialty in the supply chain. But air cargo normally moves on airlines that you might not know about or might not have heard about. So there's a lot of companies that own planes that don't move people. So that sort of exists in their own world. There are also on regular planes that might be carrying passengers. They might also be carrying cargo as well. That would typically be in the lower hold, so down in the bottom of a plane like this, where people are going to sit up at the top. They might have their luggage in the bottom, and some of that space is actually going to be sold to what's called a freight forwarder, or someone to actually move cargo on the plane. That's another way that airlines earn money. So that's fun. So why would you use air freight? Air freight is fantastically fast. For lack of a better term. It's really quick. You can get stuff overnight in most instances across the world, right? Depending on where you're going from and to. But you can get stuff where it needs to be as quickly as you possibly can. Air freight is the fastest way of moving items across large distances, and so it is why the overnight industry exists, is because of the creation of airplanes. And really it comes down to, it's primarily driven by one man, Fred Smith of FedEx, who came up with the idea in the 70s of moving people's stuff on a plane that looks something like this, as a matter of fact. They had pretty small aircraft back in the day, and they would, the sort of revolutionary idea was to load up a plane with stuff, fly those planes from different locations into one central hub, and then to switch those packages out with whatever they needed, and then send them back out to those destinations overnight. And that caused a revolution in the industry, and it really created the networks that we have right now. So what you might see is in the very early days of FedEx, they might have had one or two places that they might have, or let's call them 6 different places that they sourced volume from. Sort of major markets, and then they would all fly into Memphis, Tennessee. All the planes would get loaded up. At the end of the day, they'd fly into Memphis, Tennessee, and then packages from, say, Columbus, Ohio, going to New York City. In Memphis, they would get shifted from one plane to the next, going back to Memphis, and then out they would go again. So it's a fascinating thing, but it really is as simple as bringing stuff into one central point and then going back out. The air cargo world is expensive, though, because airplanes are not cheap. The pilots who are flying a big jumbo jet like that will have thousands of flight hours and lots of experience, to keep that plane from falling out of the sky, which is important. So that experience comes with a premium. It is expensive to own a fleet of planes, and it requires there's a bump in cost as well. So we'll kind of get into why you would be using air freight. if you have something that is like time critical or time sensitive that really has to get where it needs to be, and there's a business case for that, then you would probably be using some sort of air cargo. The other thing that might make it worth your while to ship on an airplane is if you have really low density things that are of a high value. So in a former life, my job was to move jewelry around the world, really high, valuable stuff, really high dollar items, and really low, right? Like think of how big a ring is. It's like that big, or a necklace, right? They're relatively small, low density. So I shipped a lot of air freight back then. It was a fun world, and life was very easy because stuff was getting where it needed to be very, very quickly. You would typically not be shipping pillows on an aircraft because those are really big, low density items, but they're also really low value. Now, that being said, there may be a time and a case for it. Let's say for some reason I'm on a trip overseas with my kids, or I might have gone, let's say that we go to the next state over, and they might have forgotten their blanket, right? Their all important blanket. It might be worth it to me to ship that on a plane so that I can get some sleep, because my kids, they need their stuffed animals, or they need their blankets or their pillows. So there's reasons and places for doing an air freight move, but they're lots of fun. So some of the other complexities around the air freight world is that there are some specific limitations on how you can actually ship. So that plane, even though it's big, normally can't fly all the way across the Pacific Ocean. So really we're going to focus on like moving into the US, because that's where I assume most of my viewers are going to be, is in the US. Most volume that comes into the US is made in Southeast Asia, so think China, Vietnam, Thailand, that sort of part of the world. That's a long flight from the Southeast Asia into the US. And most planes can't do that in one flight. So what they'll typically do is they'll stop somewhere, and typically in one of two places. They'll either stop in Incheon, South Korea, or in Anchorage, Alaska. Anchorage is a pretty big stopping point for the larger domestic parcel places like UPS and FedEx. Anchorage, Alaska gives them an advantage in that they not only can they refuel, but they're also in the US, and they're within the US import zone, so they can do all their importations in Alaska, and they can actually break the volume up from one plane onto two different ones going to the US East Coast or the US West Coast. So Anchorage provides them a nice spot kind of where they can come, get refueled, break up the volume, and ship it, say, into, like, let's say New York on the East Coast, or if you're talking FedEx or UPS, Louisville or Memphis, and then they could ship a West Coast plane down to somewhere in California, typically is what you'd see there. Incheon, typically see that more with the more traditional air cargo airlines, and they use it really as just kind of a refueling point. There's not a whole lot of shifting of volume that happens there, but some does, but it's typically a normal like stopover point. Other than that, planes, because they're so expensive to use and maintain, you require a significant amount of optimization. And so what you're seeing here, this is kind of a cutout of a plane. So imagine we take this plane right here and we cut it in half, and you're looking down, right, square at the plane. So this is what we would look like inside of the cargo hold of that plane. So these green blocks here are going to represent stuff, volume, cargo that got put on that plane. And they're going to be optimized. You can see this is, say, the orange part is, let's call it the fuselage of the plane. So as this plane, right, you can see it's not uniform all the way down. And the load planners are going to optimize the internal space of that plane to make sure that they're maximizing what they're able to get on there and to make as much profit as possible. So each segment of the plane has a different configuration, and the people on the ground are going to load and build what are called ULDs to fit as closely as possible the interior shape of that cargo area. There's a lower one that looks a little bit different. This would be an upper cargo hatch. And so they'll load, what they'll do is they'll build these kind of weird looking things, and they'll put them on what's called a cookie sheet, which is that is an industry term, and it is exactly what you think it is. It is a big metal slab, and what that will allow them to do is to build that sort of shape, and then they'll actually load and roll it onto the plane. So a normal cargo aircraft would look a lot like a regular passenger aircraft, but there's no seats inside, and on the ground they've put a bunch of rolling wheels for ease of moving stuff onto that plane. If you've watched the movie Castaway, that actually has a good view of what the inside of one of these planes look like, and not a lot has changed since that movie came out in the 90s. Right, there's not a better way of moving stuff on a plane than what we saw even back then. So that's it. Other things that are important to know: there are a lot of regulations on moving stuff on the air, because no one wants a plane to fall out of the sky. So if you're shipping, there's some stuff that can't get shipped on a plane. Things like hazardous material, stuff that might be flammable, normally doesn't go, or it requires special labeling. So one of the things that get shipped a lot on aircraft is iPhones, stuff from Apple. Those all have lithium batteries. Lithium is highly flammable, but get shipped on a plane all the time because they're packaged correctly. There's a lot of labeling. There's a lot of sort of communication that happens up front, so the pilots know what's on board, and they're able to control it if they need to. So really fascinating industry. We'll probably do another video about it. I could talk for days. Moving stuff on a plane is my favorite part of logistics. It's super fun, and it's fast. That's the best part, is it's fast, which is not like this video. This video is taking a long time. There's a lot I could talk forever about planes. But all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you are watching this, you're probably one of my LinkedIn followers, and so you understand this stuff. So this is really for your friends and for people to understand the difficulties of what you encounter every day. So please share with a friend, like and subscribe below so that you can help the channel grow. If there's a topic that you want to see me cover specifically, please let me know in the comments down below. If there's a question, I'd be happy to answer them, or might even bundle them all up into a Q&A video somewhere down the line. All that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.